Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to be talking about the absolute worst class in MapleStory of 2025. Now, there are a lot of different classes in MapleStory. That's part of what makes MapleStory is the sheer amount of different classes, different aesthetics, different metas that have happened throughout the decades of this game's lifespan. And there are so many different classes. Some have been amazing, some have been dog shit, some have always been dog shit, and some have been always amazing. Now, I want to tell you guys what the worst class in the game is for 2025 right at this moment as of recording this video, and honestly has been either the worst or one of the worst throughout this entire year, and I think will continue to be dog shit until the end of the year at a bare minimum. About 8 months ago at the start of this year, I made this video saying the best class in MapleStory 25. It did very well, so thank you all for watching this video. And I predicted and was right about Zero being the best class of 2025. Now, you might argue that maybe it's something else at this point, or maybe Zero is just top 5 or top 10 or whatever you want, but you can't argue that Zero is not a very OP broken class and has been this entire year, has been consistently performing at the highest level, clearing all of the most endgame, hardest things to clear in the entire game, either first or one of the first to do it. And its kit is just so overloaded, it makes it so OP. So now that got me thinking, what's the worst class? There has to be a worst. If there's a best, there's a worst, right? When you guys think worst class, what do you think? You think maybe Lara? I want you to drop a comment right now while you're watching this video on what you think the worst class in the game is. Do you think it's Lara? Do you think it's something like Blaze Wizard? Do you think it's Phantom? Like, what do you think it is? And then come back later when you watch the whole video, drop an edit in your comment, say the code word at the end of the video so I know you watched it, and let me know what your actual thoughts are on the video. And now, drum roll please. The worst class of MapleStory 2025 is... It's actually Hayato, believe it or not. Listen, before you get mad, before you tell me how shit your class is, I promise you Hayato is worse. Just hear me out. I'll explain why it's literally the worst class of this year and is unironically not only the weakest class in the game right now, it is, in my opinion, one of the most dysfunctional classes in the whole game as well. But before I tell you all of this, I want to remind you guys to subscribe if you haven't already, pull up to the live stream and join the Discord so you don't miss out on any updates and you can watch a lot of the other videos and get help with whatever you want. But I also want to remind you guys that when I say something is the worst class in the game, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you play this class, your gameplay through MapleStory will be absolutely bricked. You will not be able to clear things like CRA or C10E or Black Mage. No, of course not. Whenever somebody is talking about whether something is the best or the worst, you should generally assume that they are talking about in an endgame setting unless they specify otherwise. Because as you guys should know, and as I preach all the time, your class pick doesn't actually matter until you really get to the late or end game. That's when it actually starts to matter, because your gear is really good, you have everything, and the only difference between you and others is just what class you play. But if you're still a new player and you're progressing through the game, you can get very strong just from the gear and you'll be able to clear all the early, mid game, even late game stuff, but the end game is where you're going to struggle. So when I say Hayato is the worst class of the game, I'm specifically talking about in the late to end game scenario. But honestly, I think Hayato is so bad at the moment that it's bad in almost any point of the game. Now you might be thinking, Duky, what credibility do you have to talk about Hayato? Why would you make this video? What do you know? What do you know? You don't know shit. Well, I mean, I guess you're right. I guess you're right, and you don't have to listen to the video. But all I gotta say is if you want to listen to my opinion on Hayato, you should, bro. And you shouldn't listen to anybody else's opinion about it. So I'm going to give you guys some information about my character. My character is 500 mil CP. So you might see this and be like, holy shit, this is the strongest guy in the whole game. Not really. There are some end gamers stronger than me, of course. There's people who have higher CP than me. They do more damage and all that stuff. Actually, a lot of people do more damage because Hayato's so dog shit. But you can't argue that my character isn't funded. My character is very strong. As a matter of fact, if you know what Hexa converted is, my Hexa converted is around 99k, almost 100k converted, which is pretty end game. Like, it's a pretty strong character. I have true 22-star full 10-set pitch. Every single one of the pitch items is at 22 stars. Yes, this is on the heroic worlds. This is not an interactive world. I did get these all drops, and I did 22 star them. And don't ask me if my heart isn't 22. Of course it's 22. Same with the ET and the Source and the Dream Belt and the CFE. Whatever it is, I got it at 22. Anyways, The point is, I have really good gear on this character. Boo-hoo, bro. Yes, the slime ring's also 23. I'm sorry. Like, I feel like I'm going crazy right now because every single time somebody asks me, like, oh, you have 10-cent pitch, they'll be like, well, your part is probably 17 stars. Like, no, it's not. Well, you probably cut a corner here. No, I didn't. My gear is good. 500 mil CP. So why am I complaining? Well, the reason why I'm complaining is two main things about Hayato, to be honest with you. The first thing is the damage that this class outputs, despite being 500 mil CP, almost 100k converted, is actually so far below every other class. It's not even comparable. It's not even comparable. Like, that's how bad this class's damage output is right now in the game and has been bad throughout the whole year. Earlier in the year, you could argue it's not literally the lowest, but after every patch that has had some sort of hexa update or some sort of balance patch, we have been completely neglected to the point that we're literally like 3 or 4 patches behind every other class. It's like so bad. It's so bad. Sia does like double our damage and they only have 1 mastery. It's actually hilarious at this point. Now, I've been playing Hayato for almost 10 years. I made my first Hayato back in 2015 in December. So this year, at the end of the year, will be my 10th year of playing this class. And I kid you not, I think the state that Hayato is in now, in terms of the meta, in terms of the way that people play MapleStory, is the worst state it's ever been in at least the last 10 years. That's how dysfunctional this class is in terms of party bossing, solo bossing, damage output. It's so bad right now. Are you still wasting your time cooking your own food? With Cook Unity, you could get professionally cooked food straight to your door so you can get back to farming faster. All the meals are cooked by professional chefs with thousands of reviews. They got hundreds of different recipes and filters to cater to all dietary restrictions. I chose Chef Esther's teriyaki chicken, and you could see all the nutritional info that comes with it and all of the ingredients too. It's super easy. It just takes a few minutes to heat up, so you don't need to waste any more of your precious gaming time. Click my link below to receive 50% off of your first Cook Unity box and free cookies for life, which is crazy. Anyways, thanks for listening. It would help me out so much if you tried it, and let's get right back to the video. So let me give you guys some information, right? You may or may not have seen, but in my last video, I cleared Baldrix, right? And Baldrix is the latest endgame boss, and I cleared it. But me and my other 2 party members, the Shadower and the Arc, all ran BAs during the fight. Now, to be fair, I don't have screenshots of their BAs because they weren't like recording or anything like that. But we were talking about our BAs while we were running this fight. And I mean, you just have to take my word for this one. I don't actually have a screenshot, but we were talking about our BAs and we were comparing numbers. I'm not joking. The Arc, who is around 98.5k converted, so he's only a little bit weaker than me, basically, is what I'm saying. In terms of raw gear, like his gear and stuff is only a little bit worse than mine, was doing more than 60% my damage. He was doing more than 60% of my damage. I don't know if you realize how crazy that is. And I'm not bad at playing this class. It's not like I'm misplaying. I'm actually very good at playing Hayato and I have very good uptime and all these things. I'm very good at min-maxing the class and whatever, right? Now, he's obviously really good at Arc too. But to be out-damaged by 60%, and the Shadower in my party was out-damaging me by around 40%, is astronomical. Like, that is such a big amount of gap. The Shadower has around the same gear as me. Like, in terms of gear and funding, I'd say maybe he's like maybe just a tiny bit slightly more funded on his gear. But regardless, it's not enough to be like a 40% difference or a 60% difference. To be fair, to be completely fair, the difference wouldn't be as egregious if Baldrix wasn't as bad for Hayato or the way that Hayato's kit is. So Hayato is weak not only because it's raw numbers, right? When I say raw numbers, I just mean like when you hover over a skill, you look at its damage percentage, right? Or you look at how many lines it does. That's what I mean by raw numbers. It's not only weak because of its raw numbers, it's also weak because the class has a back-ended burst. And when you're doing endgame bosses, if your burst is back-ended, it means you're not going to line up with the rest of your party, which means if you do want to line up with the rest of your party, you have to sacrifice some of your burst to burst either immediately or pre-charge Sukunos outside, and that way you have the back end of it on entrance, but then you don't have the ramping up part. Now, you might not know what that means, but let me explain it to you. Hayato's burst skill, or burst buff, is this skill over here called Princess Sukuno's Blessing. And how this skill works is when you press the skill, you get this buff that starts ticking, right? But as this buff ticks more and more, you get increasingly more final damage. So the long story short is, as this buff continues, you are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So that means you would want to unload all of your damaging skills, ideally, towards the end of this buff, because that's when you're at your strongest, right? Because this buff makes you stronger over time. The problem with that is that means if you were to enter the boss and pop this buff, as you can see, it takes a long time to get to its fully maxed amount of final damage, which is 10 seconds left of the buff. You would have to not use your burst skills for 35 seconds when you enter the boss. So you are going to be permanently delayed by 35 seconds relative to every single other party member that you are going to be in a party with. No matter what party comp you're in, you are going to be 35 seconds. Maybe, you know, you're generous. Maybe you have a cooldown hat. Maybe you're like 30 seconds or something. You're going to be behind the rest of everybody, which means not only will you never have a bind for your burst, which makes it harder to actually do your burst because the boss can move around, the boss can turn invincible, or whatever it is, right? You're also desynced when it comes to party buffs. So if you are having any party buffs, like let's say Shadow puts down their smoke screen and they give you crit damage, you're not going to really get that for your burst, right? Because you have to do it at the end of the buff. Now, alternatively, like I said, you can just pop the burst skill immediately and then do your whole burst. But the problem is you didn't give the Princess Sakuno's Blessing buff enough time to ramp. So that means you are doing your burst with less final damage than optimal. So either way, you're fucked. Either way, you're never actually going to get your actual damage output in a party boss. You're just not going to. It's not going to happen unless you're partying with a bunch of other Hayatos, or you're partying with people that are so far above the spec of the boss and you can afford to int just so you could get your own personal damage out there. So that's the second reason why it's weak. It functionally does not work with other party members. It literally doesn't work. Having a back-ended burst, some Dawn Warrior players understand, right? You have to cut your sun towards the end of the duration of the skill. The difference is the sun is nowhere near as impactful as Princess Sakuno's Blessing. Princess Sakuno's Blessing literally gives you 50% final damage. And if you don't get that, you are gimping your damage by a tremendous amount, 10, 15, maybe even 20% final damage, just because you can't properly use the skill. So that's one thing, right? The class itself doesn't work properly. The second thing is the numbers are also very low on the class, meaning its raw damage output, even in optimal settings, is not high. So you combine these two things. The class is straight up weak, and you can't even get that weak ass damage out properly. So you're super weak. You're double weak. Another thing about Hayato is you have no support. So you might think like, okay, well, maybe it has some sort of support that you can give the party to make up for its own lack of self-damage. Unfortunately, that's not how things work on MapleStory. It's not like other MMOs where class was doing weak damage. At least it has some support, so it's worth taking. No, this game is literally all about damage, and Hayato has zero support. Zero. You have nothing. You have no support at all. So you are in the slot of the party of a pure DPS, the same as like Nightwalker, for example. And it's like, why would somebody want to party with a Hayato who has literally zero support, is a pure DPS, but does zero damage? So it's hard to even party with anybody on Hayato because you're just so unoptimal. You're never going to play the bosses properly because the bosses aren't designed around back-ended burst, and you also do no damage and offer no support. Okay, then you might start thinking, all right, I get it, Duky. Stop yapping. Hayato's weak. It doesn't work properly in a boss setting because it's back-ended or whatever the fuck you're saying. Like, it's probably really easy to play that makes up for it, right? It's probably something that's like brain dead, so like at least it's really easy. No, actually it's the opposite. Hayato is, in my opinion, the hardest class in the whole game to play properly. Now, if you want to know exactly why Hayato is the hardest class in the game to play properly, I have two videos for you here. Comprehensive Hayato guide, which you can watch and learn all about Hayato, and I have the burst breakdown, a dedicated video just alone on the burst. Without any arguing, to be honest with you, the Hayato burst sequence, like when you're doing your burst, is the most difficult burst to do in the entire game perfectly. If you want to do the burst perfectly, it is the hardest inputs back to back to back in the entire game. Yes, that means it's harder than Kali. Yes, that means it's harder than Kadena. Yes, that means it's harder than Blaster. Yes, that means it's harder than any other class that you could think of. Maybe you can argue some other stuff about how Hayato has, you know, really good movement or something, or it has super stance, or it even has lifesteal, so it's like it has really good survivability, right? But you have constant animation canceling, constant buff upkeeping, constant awareness of what's around you, because if you have multiple targets, your burst does no damage, you're back-ended. There's just like a million things that make Heido so hard. It's too much for this just one video, but I'm pretty sure everybody agrees that Heido is one of the hardest classes in the whole game. I personally think it's the hardest, but you can't deny that it is one of the hardest classes in the entire game to play perfectly. So that just goes back to what I'm saying. The class is extremely hard to play. It doesn't work in a party because it's back-ended. The damage, the self-damage is extremely low, and it has 0 support. So what is Heido even good at then? What is Heido good at then? And that's exactly why I'm making this video. It's deadass good at fucking nothing. It's good at fucking nothing. This class is so bad. It's actually so bad right now. You know what? I'm going to be generous. Heido is very, very, very good at farming. It's actually one of the best farming classes in the game because it's so easy to one-shot with Heido. Heido one-shots very, very easily. So if you're early to mid-game, you might think this class is OP because you're able to one-shot the mobs. But I'm going to be honest with you. Like, once you get this skill here called Janus, nothing really matters anymore. You just put down the Janus balls and the whole map just dies. So it's like, even the farming doesn't matter that much in reality, just because you have Janus. Now, I think it's important to know how we even got here. Like, why is Heido so bad? You heard me mention earlier in the video that Heido was neglected in all these different balance patches and hexa updates or whatever. Did you know, now this is not an opinion, this is a literal number. Did you know that Heido's Mastery 2, Mastery 3, and Mastery 4 all combined are around only 10% final damage for the class? Now, if you know what that means, you probably started laughing, right? You probably started laughing. These 3 skills combined have only added about 10% final damage for the class. Now, you might think, Duky, bro, your Mastery 3 and 4 aren't even max. Like, of course you're weak. Listen, buddy, even if they were max, I'd be getting literally like 0 fucking damage from these skills, okay? Anyways, you know the average amount of final damage across the classes, like all the other classes, 1 through 49 other classes, right, is like around 12 to 15% final damage per skill. Whereas for us, all 3 combined is around 10% final damage for all 3 at max. And this one in particular, if you don't max it, it actually nerfs you. It's only better than the raw skill with no mastery at max. What? So it clearly shows that the people who have been creating Heido and have been balancing it have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Like, they're deadass just making random fucking numbers. They don't know shit, okay? Maybe you're a little smart and you looked at the Heido Discord and you're like, well, Duky, actually, in the latest patch, they changed Bato Jutsu Zanko to a 2-minute cooldown. And because it's on a 2-minute cooldown now, they increase the damage on it. They give you more energy, which means you could cast more Phantom Blades, right? Which means it's more damage. The Heido Discord itself says this is about a 4% final damage increase for the class. Now, what if I told you that isn't true? What if I told you that this 2-minute Zanko change is low-key a nerf for Heido? Low-key. Or at bare minimum, it's low-key a nerf for most Heidos. Let me explain. So, because this skill is on 2 minutes now and not at 90 seconds, it is actually so much harder to use during your burst. So if you remember what I mentioned earlier, you have to press your Sakuno's Blessing buff, and you have to wait for this skill to tick up so you get more final damage, right? And let's say you wait until it's about to run out, then you use the Bata Jutsu Zanko skill. Let's go to a map so I can actually use a skill because I have to target something. You're a good boy and you unload all of your energy so that Zanko refunds you. And let's say you use Zanko now. There's around 10 seconds left, right? Boom. Your energy's maxed out. First of all, you will always overcap energy now. So no matter how good you are, you're always going to overcap energy just because Zanko gives you literally 1,000, right? So now this skill is on a 2-minute cooldown because it's 2 minutes now, right? But you can see my burst is coming up in under a minute, which means that the next cycle when I use this skill, unless everybody else in the party is on the same page and they allow you to back-ended burst and the boss's bind timer is good and the boss doesn't move around, you will be forced to either not be able to use this skill in your origin or at all during your Sakunos because it's going to come up towards the later part of your Sakunos. If you don't have that window available to you, it's not going to be there. You can't use the skill more freely as you did before when it was 90 seconds, and you could use it maybe at 15 seconds left or at the start of your origin. Using this skill now is even more difficult in the middle of your origin sequence. The origin burst is even harder now because if you were to use Batsujutsu Zanko in the middle of your origin, you would not only overcap during your origin with the 3 slashes at the end of it, you would have to use it at the end of your origin window. If you don't know how Hido's origin works, you get a buff when the origin opens up, and you have 10 seconds to use all of your burst skills within this buff, and then close your origin. You would be forced to be using Zonko towards the end of this, which means you're going to overcap, and you're not going to be able to use your slashes, or you're not going to be able to unload all of your Phantom Blades. So it actually makes it very, 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 very difficult to properly do your burst. Close to impossible. Not even I have been able to do it consistently. Sometimes you can get it off if all things line up. But long story short, it seems like a buff on paper, but in actual bossing, it's low-key a nerf, because you're going to have to use Zonko earlier into your rotation so that it lines up easier in the future, which means you're not getting the max amount of Sukuno's Blessing buff. Let's talk about some other things about this class that make no sense. First of all, your hyper skills. What the fuck are these hyper skills? Like, literally none of them are for our main bossing skills. Like every other class in the game, the hyper skills passives, like they make sense. For this class, they make no sense. Like they just like don't do shit, to be honest with you. Another thing with Hido that's also very weird and very annoying and very out of date is if you were to die with your Susanoo skill out, which is this big summon, this is one of our burst skills, right? If I were to die, the skill would just go away. It wouldn't even do its explosion damage when you die. It just straight up fucking disappears, right? Hitakiri Strike. This is a buff that gives you crit damage now with the Hexa Mastery. If you were to die, the buff just goes away. Like, it's not one of those buffs that just like stays like everything else where you die, it just fucking goes away. There's like a million skills you have to constantly upkeep. So for example, you have a lot of skills that have very short cooldowns, and you have to weave these skills in as you're doing your main attack. So this skill, Shinsoku, it stacks up to 3. You never actually want it at 3 because that means you don't have another stack coming up. So you have to constantly be pressing it. Instant Slice as well. You can press it. Falcon's Honor, you could also press it to gain energy. So you have a skill that's on a 7-second cooldown. You have a skill that's on a 10-second cooldown. You have a skill that's on a 10-second cooldown as well, that you have to constantly press all the time. You have to press Phantom Blade around every 30 seconds. If you're really sweating it, you would maintain your Batsujutsu stacks and your Willow Dodge stacks by staying on the boss. It's just a lot. And you know what's another thing that's also incredibly frustrating about Hido is even our burst skill. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I'll actually show you in Lucid, for example. Lucid is a perfect example of this. Any boss in the game that has some sort of minion spawns in is inherently a horrible boss for Hido. So Lucid, Arknell, Vihila, Baldrix, Kaling, Kalos, all of these bosses are horrible for Hido. So for example, one of our burst skills here, Batsujutsu Zanko, this is one of our main burst skills. It's like the big juice, right? This skill's damage gets split based off of how many targets it's hitting. So if I hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the entirety of the skill's damage is split by 1/5. So I only did 1/5 of the skill's damage on Lucid herself. 4/5 of the skill's damage was on bullshit like dummy targets, right? There's no other skill in the game that works like this way. No other skill. Like, this is the only skill in the game that is like this. Imagine, let's say you're a Buccaneer and you used Howling Fist. Imagine you were to use Howling Fist right here and the damage just gets split amongst all the targets. Imagine you were a Dawn Warrior and you use your Sun. Imagine all of the damage gets split across all the targets. You would be like, this is unacceptable. You are literally doing 0 damage. Imagine you're a Nightwalker and you're using Rapid Throw and all of the damage gets split amongst all the targets. It would make you so angry. So Hidos have to always constantly have this like awareness in the map that other classes don't need to have. You don't need to have as much awareness because when you're doing your burst, you don't want it to split amongst other targets, right? So you've heard me yap for like 20 plus minutes now at this point about Hayato. If you watched up until this point in the video, I want to say thank you. I know this video is very like, I'm very passionate, I'm very emotional in this video, right? Well, when you play something for 10 years, you don't want to see that class suffer. And when it's in the worst state ever, it definitely feels like shit. And it feels so shit to the point that I don't even feel like min-maxing my Hido. Now, my Hido is strong. Like, I want to make that clear. It's already min-maxed. And when I mean min-max, I mean hyper endgame min-max. To me, I feel like there's no point. There's no point doing it because I'm not going to actually get stronger. I'm not going to be able to do anything new. So am I quitting Hido? Like, is that the result of all this? Of course not. Are you crazy? I'm not quitting Hido. There's no way. I will always be a Hido main first. But what it does mean is I am going to be waiting for the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, there actually is a light at the end of the tunnel that can potentially save us and change everything. If you haven't heard already, Hayato and Kana are getting full remasters from Taiwan MapleStory. Full remasters, reworks of their classes. They're going to functionally work completely different after this remaster. And this is the light at the end of the tunnel. You've heard me complain a lot about Hayato and how it doesn't work, right? I have a lot of optimism on this remaster. I think the classes are going to be great. I think Hayato and Kana are going to be super good after their remasters, especially Hayato, who needs it more than anybody else. I've talked so much about the remaster before on stream, and sometimes people say, like, why is Hayato getting a remaster? Like, it doesn't actually need one. The class is, like, working. It's like, no, you actually just don't know shit, and Hayato does need a remaster so badly, like, extremely badly at this point, because it just doesn't work in the game anymore. In the past, it worked, and now it doesn't. Like, it's just out of date. Its skills don't work. Back-ended is not how this game works or should work. Everybody else who had some sort of back-end had some sort of alleviation that made it less bad. Things are becoming more and more condensed in the front, and that actually matters a lot for the late to end game. When you're in a party and you play as Hayato, you are always cooked. So many people always come to my chat and they're like, how do I burst properly with my party? And I say, you can't, you're fucked. Now, what's interesting about this remaster is the director who is doing all of this work for it is the same person that made Moshen and Lin. And if you see Moshen and Lin, both of those classes are some of the most broken and interesting classes in the game. Like, they're not like boring classes. Both Lin and Moshen are very well designed. They have very good animations. They're very, very strong. They get constant updates and support, right? So I think Hayato and Kana is going to be great. The only information we have about Hayato moving forward for this remaster is that it's planning to have 2 modes. One mode where it can move very fast and has quick, like, strikes or whatever the fuck that means. And then another mode that's like a burst mode where you do big burst damage. So I don't know what that means, but honestly, I don't think it could be worse than what it is now. Obviously, just to reiterate right before we end this video, like, what are the main problems with Hayato? Things that I'm looking forward to in the remaster that I hope get alleviated is I don't want a back-ended burst anymore. I would love to still have the mobility. Hayato is one of the most fluid mobile classes in the entire game, right? This is, for me, honestly, the most important part of playing Hayato is how fluid and the movement and all that type of stuff. That, to me, is like Hayato's identity. So I would love to still be able to move very fast, move in any direction, have the freedom to move wherever I want, be able to do like some really cool tricks with like random skills and stuff like that. I think that'd be great. But it's more so the damage profile of Hayato, like the way in which the damage comes out, and the raw numbers. Obviously, I want the class to be strong, and I want the class to be able to synergize with other parties properly. I don't want to be that guy anymore that can't burst properly and is always cooked in a party. Like, it's just not fun. It's boring, and I would rather just play something else until it gets fixed. Any Hayato related updates you can obviously expect to see on the channel. I want to shout out the Hayato Discord for double checking with me on what their biggest issues with the classes are. And yeah, I think Hayato literally is the worst class in 2025. I am very optimistic about it, obviously, but I will always be a Hayato main first. Even if I play something else for content, doesn't really matter. Hayato is my class, and I will always play it. Even after the remaster, I'm still going to keep playing it, obviously. Anyways, I appreciate you guys watching this video. If you watched the whole video and you commented at the start, edit your comment and say the word Princess Sakuno, because at the end of the day, what are we doing all this for, bro? We're protecting her as Hayato players. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what types of videos you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next one. Pull up to live stream. Check out Cook Unity. It's going away very soon. And also, if you really watched till the very end of the video, yesterday, October 2nd, was my birthday, so drop a happy birthday in the comments as well. Anyways, have a good day. Appreciate you guys so much. Shout out to my beautiful members: Blazefire, Shooms, Shagad, Ravi Espa, Koga, Skittles, CKJ, Vampiric X, Fresh and Juicy, Kelvin, Cloud Figs, Trashbot, Henzo, Dylan, Cloudy Quesos, Jason B, Sylvester L, J.A., Russell M, Mochi Teddy, Zero Sama, Shredbot, Michael R, and Suna TM. I appreciate you guys so much. If you guys ever want to submit art, put it in the Discord fan art channel, and I'll see you for the next video.